Less about Weapons, which is the new Zach Cregger film, the director behind Barbarian, one of my favorite movies of the last 5 years. I definitely was surprised with Barbarian. I really loved it. So when Weapons got announced, I was there. I was seated. I was going to watch this movie opening day. And here we are. Opening weekend, Weapons is out. Let's talk about the ending and all of that. Of course, spoilers ahead. So I'm going to go ahead and recap most of the story and talk about the story structure as well. But I'll leave timestamps up here if you just want to skip to me talking about the ending and its themes. But I also have a longer theme video I'm going to be doing as well today, so stay tuned for that. But let's get into the story of what exactly Weapons is about. Weapons revolves around Maybrook, a small town in which 17 kids go missing at 2:17 a.m. Nobody knows exactly what happened, but what we do know is that they all ran out at 2:17 a.m. and they were running in a peculiar pose. Now, the interesting aspect of all of this is they were all from the same class, Justine Gandy's class, who is played by Julia Garner here. But one kid didn't go missing, and that is Alex, and nobody knows exactly why, or what exactly these kids were up to, or who is behind all of this. So this story is broken up into 6 pieces. It is the story of Justine, who is the teacher, Archer, one of the fathers who is missing their child. You also have Paul, one of the police officers involved in the search, as well as being a part of Justine's past. You also have James in here, who is a junkie, who is homeless, who does a big contribution into finding these children as well. You also have Marcus in here, who is the principal of Maybrook, and Alex, who is the one child that didn't go missing. So we see their stories intersect with one another over the last couple of days, and that's pretty much what happens in this movie. Is you get clues here and there and little pieces that will help you sort of solve the mystery of what happened to these 17 children. So throughout the film, we see that Justine is sort of blamed for what happened to the children. She is sort of being put down by the town. She is taking the heat of it all. Archer, one of the parents who lost his child, Matthew, during all of this, is one of the people that grills Justine the most about it, and is even writing witch on her car, as they feel that she has something to do with this and she isn't getting pressured enough. We also see that the police aren't really on top of it. It's been over a month now and no leads or anything about what happened to these children, so that makes a lot of these people much more frustrated. Justine ultimately falls to vices such as drinking and going out with Paul, who is now getting married, and Paul is also going through it with seemingly not being in a happy relationship either. So Justine decides to take matters into her own hands after feeling the weight of the town and nobody doing anything, because when she tries to talk to Alex or figure out what's going on with Alex, since he is the only child that didn't go missing, she eventually winds up at his home, where she sees that his parents are there in a dazed and catatonic state. She brings this up to Marcus, the principal, who just sort of dismisses her, but seems to keep thinking about it as well. Ultimately, she decides to do a stakeout one night in order to figure out who's coming in and out of this house and what exactly is going on in there. Now, she is drinking still, so she eventually falls asleep at night, and a frenzied woman comes out of the home to cut one of her hairs. And then the story cuts into Archer, who is the father who is trying to find his missing child. Archer is sort of detached from his reality, not even really paying attention to his wife or at work, and he is just so caught up in trying to figure out what's going on with the children. He goes to confront the police multiple times. He feels they're not doing their job, so he decides to take it on his own to sort of cross-examine all of the ring footage that he can find in order to see where the children ended up. Some of the parents aren't as cooperating as the others, and they just sort of want to move on, and they sort of just want their privacy at this point, which is nothing bad, right? Everybody deals with things differently, but Archer is set on finding out what happened to the children, and through some ring footage he's able to obtain, he sees that at some point they have to have cross paths and circles the perimeter there. What we see both Justine and Archer have in their respective storylines is this nightmare of a woman in some heavy makeup, which of course is Gladys, who is going to be the main villain in this film. We then cut to Paul and James's story. Paul is a police officer who has some background with Justine, and James is a junkie that is homeless who is just trying to get their next high by just finding whatever to sell or pawn. James is the one that finds the home and is able to enter the home of Alex, where he is able to find the parents in a catatonic state, and this is where he's able to just take a shitload of things, but he also finds the kids in the basement there, and they also are in a dazed look. He goes back to pawn the stuff that he was able to take from the home, and then he sees that there is a reward for all of these children, so he's like, I need that money, I know where these kids are. So he decides to go back to the police station to report this, where he comes across Paul again. Now, they had a meeting earlier in the film where we saw that Paul actually punched James because because he got poked by one of his needles, and he was like, I never want to see you again. That was all caught on the patrol camera, so Paul doesn't want to get in trouble with the Force. James tells him, hey, I know where the kids are, take me there, let me get my reward, and that'd be it, right? We see that Paul enters the home but doesn't come out for hours, and then eventually comes back out again, but this time he seems to be in a trance of sorts and almost in a daze, as well as we see the parents and the children be in the home, and he drags James into the house as well. We then get Marcus's story, who is the principal that is played by Benedict Wong, in which we see that he is sort of feeling what Justine's saying and wants the parents of Alex to come in to see what's going on at home. Instead, he gets Gladys, the aunt, who says that the parents aren't able to come, but that she can provide any information that he needs. But he's like, no, I want the parents to come. I want to talk to them. And Gladys gets a little bit pissed about this and says, fine, I'll talk to them. We then see Gladys show up at Marcus's home a couple of days later, where she pretty much puts him under a spell, and under this spell, she forces him to kill his partner and go and get Justine, and I assume kill her as well, because Gladys finds out that Justine was the one behind trying to get CPS involved and to investigate more into the home. This is why she also took one of Justine's hair locks in order to use it on her branch that she uses to control people. So what she does is she has this tree that she takes branches from, and with this branch you put someone's hair on it and you put your own blood on it, and you're able to control whoever it is that you want to control. In this case, it was Marcus. He was right in front of her. She uses a bell in order to initiate this, and that's exactly how she gets them into this trance and dazed look. Then we see, of course, Marcus go and find Justine, and he finds her when she's arguing with Archer at the gas station, and he attacks her. Now Archer looks bewildered by all of this and tries to help Justine as much as he can. Eventually, they're able to get away from Marcus. And as he's still chasing them, he gets run over and becomes a total mess across the road. Like, it was disgusting, honestly. And I think that that is when the brutality starts as well, because Marcus had just recently attacked his husband by bashing his head in with his own head. So really, this movie gets really brutal in its third act. We finally get the story of Alex in the final part, and this is where we find out that Gladys was apparently a aunt that his mother has, and she was coming to stay with them because she was very ill and they were going to take care of her. But what she is actually doing here is committing a spell in order to have them in a catatonic state so she can feed off of them and get their life force of sorts. Now, Gladys says that the parents aren't enough to Alex and that she's actually going to need some of the kids from his school. So she gives him an ultimatum: bring me personal things from them and I will possibly let your parents go, right? And if you don't do this, then I'll make them hurt each other or even you, because I can make them do whatever. This is why Alex decides to get personal things from the kid in order to bring them to Gladys, and this is how she's able to get all of the kids to come to their home at 2:17 a.m. in order to have them in the basement and just suck the life force out of them. But Gladys realizes that Justine and also Archer are onto them and decides it's time to move on. So she tells Alex, we're gonna move on from here. This is when Justine and Archer are able to get into the home, but then they are attacked by both Paul and also James. We see that Justine ultimately has to kill Paul with a gun and also kills James with a gun as well. Archer then finds his son Matthew in the basement, but right before he can get to him, Gladys attacks him and puts him under her spell. So now he is out there to attack Justine, and Alex's parents are after Alex as well. Alex thinks quick on his feet and sees the branches that Gladys uses to control people. He's then able to get a lock of her hair from her wig, wraps it around the branch, and uses his own blood in order to get the kids to go out and attack Gladys now, which they do, tearing her apart limb by limb. We see Gladys die. That's when the spell wears off everybody, including Archer. Archer's able to get back into it and be himself again really quickly, but that's just because he was under the spell for a short amount of time compared to the kids, and especially Alex's parents, who don't come out of the spell right away. The narrator then tells us that the kids started to barely talk after 2 years, and Alex's parents are now institutionalized, and Alex went to go live with somebody else because they were never able to come off of the spell. And that's pretty much how the movie ends. So this movie really had a unique way of telling its story with its structure, with Justine, the teacher, with Archer, the father, Paul, the police officer, James, the junkie, Marcus, the principal, and Alex, the one child that didn't go missing. So each of these characters sort of help to unravel the mystery, whether it's Justine first being the one that sort of says, let's talk to Alex a little bit more, find out what's going on. Eventually her following Alex into his home and seeing his parents in that catatonic state, raising the alarm to Marcus, which is going to start the snowball effect that's ultimately going to lead to Marcus's demise, because we see that Marcus confronts Gladys about this, and then we see, of course, Gladys go to Marcus's home and put him under her spell to go and attack Justine. Unbeknownst to Gladys, that Archer will be with Justine, who is the one that actually finds out that the kids all ran maybe to one specific spot together after looking into the ring footage, because the police didn't bother to do that, which I think goes more with the police not really doing their job, and the community is the one that ultimately has their own backs. And thus, with Archer seeing how Marcus runs after the gas station, he sees that that's how the kids ran as well, and sort of deduces that the person behind getting Marcus all riled up and like zombified has to be the same person that got the kids to run out at 2:17 a.m. Paul investigates the home and is able to get Justine to go in there because he's in there as well, and that sort of causes the chain that continues on with Justine and Archer being able to go into the home now, because James was the one that found the children, took Paul into that home. So all of these dominoes work together, creating this ripple effect, the snowball effect, whatever you want to call it, which ultimately led to Alex being able to use the distraction between Justine, Archer, Paul, and James in order to free the kids and use Gladys's own magic against her and have her be killed by the kids, ultimately ending the spell on his parents, the kids, and Archer. And thus, all of the stories collided to make this one thing happen. Very interesting. So pretty much at the end of Weapons, what we have here is Gladys, who is played by Amy Madigan, is a ancient witch who has been infiltrating families, I believe. So we'll get more to that in my theory in a bit. But I believe Amy Madigan is a witch here who is infiltrating Alex's family in order to suck the life force out of them. Now, I don't believe that she is actually the real aunt. I think that's something that maybe she does over time. We clearly get a sense that she is much older than she says, maybe 2 or 3 generations older. Some very old dialogue when she's speaking to Marcus when she visits him at his home that even he finds interesting. So Gladys has definitely been around and is clearly doing this at different communities in order to sort of rejuvenate herself. At the beginning, when we see her during Alex's first encounter with her, she is very decrepit and old and tired looking. She eventually starts to grow her own hair. She's wearing a wig at the beginning, and she looks to be a little bit more youthful in her face. And the whole deal here with Alex is that he has to keep feeding his parents, who are now stuck in a catatonic state, while she feeds off of them, but she decides that she needs more. She needs more youthful souls, and that's why she has Alex go and get his classmates' personal belongings so she can control them with that branch that she uses. That's why she has that special tree she brings with her, because the branches are seemingly magical. I'm not entirely sure if Gladys herself has magic or if it's just this special tree that's able to grant magic, because we see that Alex is able to use it himself with his own blood. So it seems that it's more this plant in itself that has the magic, and Gladys has been using it now for God knows how long in order to be able to live sort of forever and keep rejuvenating herself. Her plan seemingly was to keep these kids in the basement and keep sucking the life force out of them as long as she could. But once she saw the jig was up, she was just going to move on to another community and do the same. And as we know, with the branch and the hair of somebody, you're able to manipulate who's under the spell to go forth and attack them. And that's why Alex uses Gladys's hair in order to get the kids to attack her. And once she died, the spell that she had over everybody was completely gone, and they were able to get back to some sense of normality, which they really don't, as we hear from the narrator. It's going to be hard for them to even get back to where they used to be, as it's taken already years for them to barely start talking. So a very bittersweet ending indeed. And I thought this movie tackled a lot of different themes here, and of course one of the most prominent ones was that AR-15 that we saw on top of the house during the dream that Archer was having. And I think that that really is showcasing more of what we see that Zach Cregger is getting at here. Maybrook missing, the way that it's set up and the memorial and everything of that really reminded me of what we see with school shootings, with a town that is seeking answers and trying to understand why. And we see that grief takes several stages, whether it's starting with sadness, depression, eventually leading into anger, and just this feeling of despair and of hopelessness of the same things happening and no one doing anything about it. And that's what we see Archer as as a parent, sort of start to feel there is a sense that the police and the systems that are in place to sort of give you that illusion of safety and that nothing will go wrong or that things will get solved is completely gone. And we see Archer have to take matters into his own hands alongside with Justine. At first, they're bickering and fighting with one another and really trying to blame one another about what's going on, but it's more of the systems that were there that didn't do much to help them, because Alex is questioned by the police from the get-go. The aunt is there, the dad is there, seemingly not looking normal at all, and that something totally wrong is happening here, but the police are just like, well, we talked to them, it's over. And we see this sort of feeling that they aren't doing much and they're not really going forth and helping. And it's the community at the end of the day that comes together to help find these kids, whether it's the junkie James, who was able to find the home and report it to Paul, the police officer, or the teacher herself, Justine, who goes out to try and talk to the student that hasn't had anything happen to them and see if they're okay and see how they're coping along with it. But of course, the student is feeling this sort of feeling of guilt and being the survivor and not being able to do much after. And Archer is the father who feels this anger and this grief and isn't able to express themselves, so they become totally absent in their life, whether it's at home or at work. But we see that they all band together to provide the little clues that will eventually help to solve the mystery of what happened to these 17 missing kids. Also, with Matthew and 2:17, the time they left, it goes back to Matthew 2:17, I feel, where it talks about the loss of innocent lives as well in that verse, which I was able to see because a subscriber commented on a previous video, and I was just like, that was great right there. So I think there's a lot that Cregger is really getting at here and trying to talk about, and that's going to go more with the theme video I'm doing later, so stay tuned for that. But one of the interesting things as well that Cregger talked about is the running the children are doing. So a lot of people were assuming it was the anime run, which myself included was, and I think Cregger got asked about this run, and he said that he was more inspired by the napalm photos of kids running during those bombings. And my interpretation of it is that what Cregger's getting at here is that children always become the collateral of violence that happens, whether it's bombings, whether it's school shootings, or what have you. They are the collateral and almost forgotten at some points, because as the narrator says, the adults in the town tried to cover up and forget about this ever happening, and they don't want to speak on it anymore. And we see that happen with tragedies a lot in our society. There is a tragedy that happens, it gets a day, a couple of days, or at best a couple of weeks of talk, and that these changes are going to happen and that this isn't going to happen again, and then it happens again, and that initial event is forgotten, and now the other event is at the forefront with the news cycle, and then they're just waiting for the next event to put it in the news cycle again. And it's this sort of repetitive thing that just keeps happening and happening and happening. And I think that Gladys is that sort of personification of that evil that happens in the world that is supposed to be stopped and changed, but it just keeps happening, because it's better not to face the reality of things than it is to tackle it head on. And we see it with so many of our characters here who are just falling into their vices or just falling into their own self-pity of sorts and not really trying to band together to put an end to all of this once and for all. It isn't until everything's put to the side with Archer and Justine that they're able to cooperate with one another and are the distraction that Alex needs in order to be able to confront Gladys and put an end to the wickedness that she has brought on to Maybrook. So I'll talk more about that in the theme video I have today, because there's a lot more to dive into it, especially with the symbolism throughout the whole film. So stay tuned for that video. But here I just want to talk about the ending and what Gladys was really up to. So in the end, Gladys just wanted to remain youthful. She wanted to get her life force back. And the way she was going to do that was with Alex's parents. That clearly wasn't enough for her. She needed more youthful souls and a lot more people. So that's why she got Alex to bring forth all of the children from his classroom, and she was going to continue to feed, because in this film they talk about parasites a lot, and Gladys is indeed a parasite who is just leeching off of the life force of others in order for herself to continue living, and she was doing this in such a wicked and evil way, honestly. Very, very despicable here. Gladys ultimately got what she deserved, and the town seemingly is going to move on, but it seems that the trauma isn't faced, and so that sort of creates a deep wound that continues to live in Maybrook. As the narrator says, the adults just brush it off, but the kids still talk about it. So I think it's something interesting to note here. a generation goes through something and they sort of try to bury it and not talk about it or fix it for the next generation, but that generation sees it, and although they may be silent now, there's sort of a way that these people are going to feel once they get older and realize what happened and that the other generation didn't do anything for them. I think a lot what we see about these characters as well is they shut themselves in, whether it's shutting themselves in their home, in their cars, or in the case of James, in their tent, from the reality of what the world really is out there. And you get a deep sense that there is a lot more troubling them, and also this event that happened, and it's not being able to cope with the things that have already happened with you and the world that keeps spinning and more things happen, and thus you're stuck in this sort of endless cycle of running around, which these characters do a lot in their dreams or in reality, and you see them just trying to get a grasp of themselves and try to move forward, but it's not really able to move forward until the evil is taken care of. In the case here, Gladys. Until Gladys is gone, that's when everybody's able to sort of move again. And that's the trauma sort of being tackled on head on. And that is something we see in the film at the end. Once Gladys is gone, who is the trauma, we see the characters are able to sort of start to get a sense of themselves again and be able to walk and move forward. But some of the characters are still stuck on that traumatic event, such as the children who this happened to aren't able to move on. Although the adults want them to be who they are or who they were, it's not going to happen. It's just something that's going to linger with them. What Gladys did will permanently change them and permanently change so many. So I think that's an interesting topic we're going to discuss in the theme video, so stay tuned. And it gets deeper than that, I feel. So we'll talk about that in the other video. I think I made this video a bit too long already, but let me know your thoughts and opinions on Weapons, its ending, its story, and all of that. Check out my review if you haven't already, and I'll see all of you next time. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. We're on the road to 50,000 subscribers, about 8,000 away from that, so super excited to reach that point, hopefully by the end of the summer, and I'll see all of you next time. Stay safe, stay positive.